Hi everyone, and very welcome to yet another episode of Captain Speaking. It's me, Peter Hörnfeldt, together with...
Me, Ben Watts. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This week, we're going to be exploring the initial report of the LaGuardia incident, as well as looking at what pilots can do if you're in a safety culture that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we're going to be exploring all of this together. But Peter, first of all, how you doing? How's your week?
I'm great. I just came back from Spain. I've been down to my mother-in-law.
Nice.
Yeah. She hadn't seen the kids for a couple of weeks. So we tried to get down there every other week. And now it was almost 3 weeks since we were there. And I mean, spring in Spain, especially northern Spain, is just beautiful. It's 28 degrees during the day. Everything is green. Everything smells good. We met up with some friends. So yeah, it's Monday now when we record this, and I'm in a really really good mood. And not only that, I'm actually gearing up for something that I'm super looking forward to. I've been asked to go down and do a keynote at a gathering for private jet owners in southern Spain.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Justinas, who's actually following the podcast, by the way, so he called me up or contacted me through LinkedIn, I think, and asked if I was willing to come down and talk a little bit about things like safety management systems and all of the things that I've learned through monitoring as many accident reports as I have. And I thought, awesome, I've never thought about safety from their perspective, because obviously those of you who doesn't know, if you fly a private jet that you own yourself, in many cases you can do that as a single pilot, so without any co-pilot, but they're highly complex machines that fly at the same altitudes as we do with the airliners, so up at like flight level 410 and even above that, in really really fast jet operation, IFR, but with a PPL as a private pilot license. So it's for me, it's about kind of rethinking how to explain safety for something that is very similar to what we do, but in other ways very very different. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to do about a 30-minute keynote, and then I'm going to hang out with the people down there and answer questions for a while. So
yeah, that'll be cool. That will be cool, because I know, having taught PPL and flown with a lot of PPL students, it's a huge jump. I remember even going from like your Cessna 152s into your complex twins, piston twins, or even relatively high performance singles. And just the speed difference, you might be cruising at 160, 180 knots in one of those. Yeah. Compared to your 90 knots, and things like energy management now comes in. Like, you're coming into the circuit in a Cessna 152, everything's done at 90 knots. Your cruise, your descent, the circuit. Whereas when you're in a Seneca, you're cruising at 160. You've now got to think about slowing down and going down at the same time. It's a whole different thing. You factor that now to jets from 41,000 feet or whatever, or 50,000 feet. That's, for a PPL, I mean, hats off. That's it's a big jump.
Yeah,
doing that single pilot is a big jump.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, we're talking about these guys. I don't know, some of them might fly more than others, but you also have the thing where when you go to a destination, we have IFR minimums. Like, there's weather minimums for how bad the weather can be before you have to divert, before you have to have an extra planned diversion alternate, things like that. But when you're flying by yourself, you also have to add on some extra safety levels.
Yeah, you do.
Both because of the complexity of the operation, but also because, how rusty do you feel? How many IFR approaches have you actually flown in the last few months? So there's a whole new level of safety thinking that I have to think about here now for it to be relevant for these people. But I mean, there's not too many of these crashing worldwide, so they must be doing a quite good job.
They must be approaching this with a very professional attitude, because skill fade is very real. If you're not flying for even a month, well, you know what it's like. We've both been where we've been in the sim maybe for a month or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and then you go flying again. It does take you're not as on point as you would be if you'd been flying a week. It takes, obviously you're there, but you're not as current as obviously as you would be if you're flying yesterday. So, and we're in the sim still. We're still thinking about this. So if you're a business owner, you're not thinking about flying, and then it's been a month, and then you jump in one of these jets and go flying. You've got to be aware of that. You've got to approach that with the respect that it deserves.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm thinking about things like decision-making skills, for example, and setting up personal minimas for yourself that might be, higher than
Yeah.
what the minimas are if you just look at what the rules are telling you. So, I'm super looking forward to that. And they're going to actually come and pick me up in one of these private jets as well. So,
Oh, cool. That
yeah.
is cool.
I've never been in one of those.
No. What is it?
So
Do you know what type of jet it is? Any ideas?
see, they told me, and I can't remember now.
Okay.
I'll look it up for the next time.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I hope so. So,
Yeah.
anyway, what about you? How's your week been?
Yeah, not quite as exciting as private jets, I have to say. Simming all week this week, fun enough. Night shifts as well for my sins. I know. Yeah, you get the short straw every now and again. So I've done 4 of those on the trot. Then it was a day shift on day 5. But yeah, they're not fun. You've done enough of them as well, I'm sure. But
I have. They're like, it's very bad. It's very bad for your like physical well-being to do those night shifts. Because I remember it. I mean, there's multiple layers of it. Obviously, if you're doing recurrent training and stuff, it's just about doing it. You just have to adapt your sleeping pattern, make sure that you're not fatigued, and of course, wish and hope that the students that you're going to take care of is not going to be fatigued either, because it's just an extra level of difficulty on top of the normal stress that people feel for these sim checks. But I remember doing teaching. We tended to do, when I started as an SF5 back in 2005, we did a lot of shorter type ratings for people that had experience but not on the specific type, and also OCC, which is operator conversion courses. That's people who have flown the 737 but not with our standard operating procedures, and those tended to be really compact back then. So it was like, I think when I started, it was 1 session for SOPs, then a low risk session, and then a check.
Oh, was it that low? I don't remember that.
And then it decreased to, I think, 2 or 3 sessions before they went for it. But anyway, because it was so compressed and because our SOPs were so advanced and so detailed, what ended up happening was that they scheduled those for the night session, which was typically from like 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. Right, but then there was always a 2 or 3 hour gap where the engineers were supposed to be able to work on the simulators before the next day started. But they put these OCC courses on those slots because they knew we would run over. Right? They knew that in that case you have like an hour or an hour and a half extra. So what ended up happening was that we did like 5.5 hour sessions from like midnight to 5 o'clock in the morning, and just cramming these standard operating procedures in. And you can imagine these poor people coming out, new SOPs, middle of the night. Like that was, I remember, you drive home after one of those sessions and you hardly know if it's day, night, morning, like whatever it is.
It's exhausting. I mean, those sessions are hard enough on their own, aren't they? They particularly for the student, because they're trying to process so much. But doing that when it's middle of the night for you, it's hard. There's no way getting around it. It's not fun in that sense. You're knackered. Coming home at 4 or 5 in the morning is never fun. But it is what it is. And to be honest with you, as the week goes on, you kind of get more and more nocturnal. You maybe getting up a little bit later, and the night shift isn't quite so bad anymore. But then obviously you got the transition then from days off to getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning rather than getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning for your early shift now. So you've got the transition to look forward to now. So
are you going on to earlies or late?
Earlies now.
Ooh, that's it's really hard.
I was getting home at 4 in the morning, and I've got my first shift next week. I'll be getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
So it's a full 12-hour reset.
Yeah. So it's I've been doing this long enough now to know how to deal with it. But it's just one of those things you have to do with when you're in the sim. But the crew will be very good. To be fair, they've all done very well. It's been a good mix this week of training sessions and checks, and they've all been very good. So they've made my life easy.
Yeah, no, that makes life much easier for sure. But and it is funny that thing with the resetting. When you do these kind of switches all the time, you do get used to it. Like you find ways of. My wife, for example, she would never be able to. If you go to bed at 8 o'clock in the evening, if she would never be able to fall asleep. She'd fall asleep at 12 o'clock anyway. But I remember when I was doing these things, if I went to bed at 7 o'clock in the evening, I fell asleep at 7 o'clock in the evening. I basically taken my body clock and just stomped on it and broken it into 1,000 pieces. Yeah. And it worked quite well for me, but that's a highly personal thing.
Everyone's different, I think, aren't they? I know from me that if I'm on earlies, for example, I'll get home in mid-afternoon. Obviously, you're tired. The mistake I would make would be to go and have a sleep for an hour or two, because then I just won't sleep at night.
No.
So I'd rather kind of suck it up, just be a bit tired throughout the afternoon and get to bed early. Then I'm much more rested than I would be if I had a little nap and went to bed at like 10 or 11 and only got 5 hours sleep. So yeah, the joys. But you know, anyone listening to this that does shift work will know you find your own ways to make it work.
Yeah, you have to. But I think this is one thing that I've found since I stopped flying, is that right now we have stabilized our like 24-hour clock to a really set pattern, right? Me and my wife, we typically go to bed around 10, 10:15, I'll fall asleep at 10:30, 11, something like that. And then I'll sleep to 7. And I do that every single day, even weekends, I do it now. And you just feel so much better. The quality of sleep is so much higher.
Yeah.
And it makes I feel that it's like luxury. It's something that I know people would pay for when they're on the shift pattern. But here
It's good for you too, isn't it? It's so much more healthier for so many different reasons.
Absolutely. Anyway, so to the main topic today. On I think Thursday, or it was Friday, European time, the NTSB released the preliminary report for the LaGuardia runway collision accident that happened back on the 22nd of March this year, 2026. For those of you who don't remember, this was an Air Canada Express flight, or JAS flight 8646, that was coming in to land at LaGuardia runway 04, I believe it was. And what happened was that a fire truck that was attending to a different aircraft that had a previous issue had been cleared to cross the runway at the same time as this aircraft had been cleared to land. And there was a mix-up and they ended up colliding on the runway. So it's been a very, very quick issuing of the interim report. Normally, it does take a month, and it did in this case as well, but it's very, very detailed. So I did a really quick video on it over on Mentor Now. For those of you who want the exact details, you can go and check that out on Mentor Now, our YouTube channel. But I think what we should do is go into some of the questions that arose from that interim report. And I know you've been looking through the comments, Ben.
Yeah, I've looked through the report and I've looked through the comments as well. And a number of things kind of stood out to me as to that just got my attention and kind of raised a question mark over them. I mean, we'll go through, there's a number of them here. I also went through the comments, as you said, and I saw there's a theme there of some of the kind of questions that people were asking as well that's worth exploring, because they are genuinely good questions. So just to fill you in, what happened when the aircraft was cleared to land, which is obviously the crew were expecting. They were cleared to land. Now, typically when an aircraft is cleared to land, the runway would be that aircraft. Nothing else would be allowed on that runway until that aircraft is stopped and vacated. However, I think it was 5 Mile Final, if I remember correctly, the fire truck was cleared to cross the runway after the other aircraft had been cleared to land. So the first question that obviously that kind of caught my attention, why or how did that happen? You know, what processes are in place within ATC to prevent that from happening, or what must have gone wrong in order for them to have cleared an aircraft to cross when an aircraft had been cleared to land? And you got any insights on that, Pedro? Anything that you know of?
So, I mean, there was a couple of things that stood out to me. First of all, there was a 21-second gap between the aircraft getting cleared to land and the fire truck, the ARFF truck being allowed to cross the runway. So there's always the risk there that it just escaped the mind of the air traffic control. And then normally they tend to have systems with these strips. Yeah. So the strips are either digital or actual physical strips still. And I would guess that in LaGuardia it's probably digital, where any time that you assign a new clearance to an aircraft, the strip changes position, and then you by the default should check the strip list to see what's going on before you issue another clearance in order to avoid something like this. But there's no question here that what had happened was that normally there would be one controller dealing with the tower frequency, which is typically just runway movement, and one dealing with the ground frequency. Okay, that was the case when this happened. Now, initially there was some thoughts about maybe one controller was handling both frequencies, and that was actually not really the case because there was a ground controller. But since we had that other aircraft, the Max 8 that had done 2 rejected takeoffs on the separate runway, the ground controller that was supposed to do all of the ground handling was dealing with that and coordinating with that crew. So the tower controller had taken it upon himself to help out his colleague and to do a bit of ground controlling as well. And here I can see where there would be a potential conflict, because if you have 2 positions, obviously then you have 2 strip setups and everything. Now, if you suddenly then start doing a little bit of the other person's work in order to help out, you could see where possibly there could be a little bit of a confusion between the roles about like which clearance has been issued. But there's no question here that the guy who gave the clearance to land and to cross, I mean, he was dealing with the runway on both of those occasions. So it's been a mistake of some sort, but it means that there's a system lapse here. It's not going to come down because anyone can make mistakes. It's the systems that have to be built up to make sure that those mistakes do not become fatal.
And it'd be obviously what the other controller was trying to do. It was best intentions, as often these things are. He was trying to help a colleague out, but in the absence of any handover of procedure that we would have, it's a bit like we see it in the flight deck where you've got pilot flying and pilot monitoring. That we both have our own specified areas of responsibility. Sometimes pilot monitoring might be getting busy with things, and the temptation as pilot flying is to go heads down into the FMC and start helping them out to reduce their workload. But the problem there now is we're blurring lines, and you can be in a situation where you're in an aircraft and both pilots are heads down and nobody's flying the aeroplane. And it's a similar scenario there where intentions are best, but unless there's an official handover of control, so people know exactly who's responsible for what part of the airport, there is a risk. And I think, just to give people a bit of an insight into what these strips we're talking about, they can be literally strips of paper or plastic, and they're positioned on different parts of a board. So that when an aircraft, for example, is cleared to land, they will and each aircraft has a strip, or each vehicle has a strip. So, and it will have the details of that flight on it. It's from, Miami to JF to LaGuardia, for example, and it'll have the flight number, aircraft. And they'll move that, when it's cleared to land, they will move that strip onto the runway part of the board. So now that if they're not sure what's happened, the controller can look down and know that that runway belongs to that aircraft. Until they vacate the runway, they move it off the runway and put it to the ground controller. And then they will start there. So something along the line there is broken down, and it'd be interesting to work out where that was. But as you said, and what we're going to be covering here with questions are basically every question we've got is a layer of Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
That has broken down. Somewhere is lined up perfectly.
Yeah.
So that's layer 1.
It's fascinating. And we should also mention here that the reason we don't have the exact answers to these questions yet is because an interim report really is only supposed to give you the broad context of what's happened. It's not going to give you the answer to all of the questions. That's going to come in the final report, which typically takes 1 to 2 years, depending on complexity. So around this time next year, or possibly even a year and a half from now, there's going to be a final report. And that is going to say these kind of things. Like in this case, the strip should have been moved but it wasn't, whatever. It's still under investigation. So what we're saying now is still purely just giving you background information about how operations tend to work and where the Swiss cheese, holes can be.
And talking Swiss cheese, the next one that stood out for me was, and I know looking through the comments, there's a lot of questions on this as well. So on the runways in America, it's slightly different to Europe. In Europe, we have what we call stop bars, red stop bars, which are just red lights that go across the taxiway, which you never cross. It protects the runway so that when you're cleared to line up, that stop bar disappears. The lights go out, you go onto the runway. In America, they have something called runway entrance lights, RELs, which are lined up on the taxiway line itself. So they're actually on the line you're going to be taxiing over to get onto the runway. And they're automatic from what I understand. And they will be red when an aircraft has been cleared to land or take off until the aircraft approaches that particular intersection. And then they'll start to disappear. Now, the protocol on that seems to be that it's very similar to a stop bar. I've actually looked it up in the FAA, and the FAA provides some guidance. Now, the reason I looked into that is because the truck 1 when they were cleared to line up, the REL lights were red. And despite the fact that he was cleared to line up, so there's a conflict there. You got the red lights, but a clearance. Now, the FAA guidance on this, and I'm going to quote it, is when a pilot observes the red lights of the REL, that pilot will stop at the hold line or remain stopped. The pilot will then contact ATC for resolution if the clearance is in conflict with the lights. So that's the FAA's take on that. So my next question on next layer of Swiss cheese is, what was the training, or why did they go over those red lights?
Yeah. You'd notice that here, obviously, the text says pilots, but this is for anyone who is working or moving a vehicle within the this area. They need to know these rules. So, yeah, I mean, training is definitely going to come into it for sure. There's always, when you have that conflict, did they know that you're absolutely not allowed to move in over red lights under any circumstance? We've been in situations like this. Sometimes a stop bar might not work properly on an airport, and our instruction that we've received is that you don't go over a red stop bar at all. No. Like if there's a red stop bar and tower tells you, you can disregard, just enter the runway, you don't unless you have like a vehicle there that physically shows you like a police officer that this is fine, because it's so easy that that something like this happens, and that the person factor in here, the human factor, has somehow failed, but the automatic system is actually correct, which it was.
I think the issue with the RELs that I can see, and I know this may be a part of it, is that in a fire truck, you're a lot lower than an aircraft. So you don't get the perspective of seeing all of these red lights. You're literally down at ground level, a lot closer to ground level. The other thing as well is, I know from watching ground vehicles, is they don't often always follow the center line. They'll use the taxiways, which is super wide for a car or a vehicle. They'll often be on the left side or the right side, so that if they weren't on the center line, it's plausible they wouldn't have even maybe noticed the RELs so much, which kind of leads me on to, would a stop bar be better? Because that covers the whole cross. Doesn't matter where you are situated, left, right, center, the stop bar is in front of you.
I mean, I kind of like both of them. I mean, I like the unambiguity of a stop bar, because a stop bar is so clear. It's just a red line that goes across the hall. That I like that. But I also like the fact that if you have made a mistake with the stop bar is behind you. You will never see it again once you crossed it. But these REL lights, they actually continue being red for the entire crossing of the runway, which means that you can, with that kind of system, you could quickly pick up that dude, at least you can stop, before you're into the runway. So I mean, if it were up to me, I would see a combination of these two systems. That actually seems like the most effective way of doing it.
And it does. What's interesting is, I looked into whether the US use stop bars, because I thought it seems strange not to, but apparently they do at certain airports anyway, but they're typically only used during low visibility procedures. They're not used during general normal day-to-day ops. Whereas we do in the UK and Europe, they're always used.
Yeah.
If they're switchable, they are used daytime, nighttime, good vis, low vis, doesn't make a difference. And I think it's just a great process that just potentially prevents this. It's another barrier, isn't it, that can prevent this from happening. So maybe that's something that may come out as something that's added on as a result of the findings.
And then of course, on top of that, there was questions in the comments regarding this truck was on two different frequencies. So the truck was listening to the tower frequency, which you have to if you're going to cross a runway, but they were also listening to their own internal firefighting frequency. And apparently, as this I should mention as well that this firefighting truck was originally not the one that was supposed to do the communication with the tower.
That's true.
So there was a convoy of vehicles, out of which normally just one needs the clearances and the rest of the convoy follows. And originally there was like a vehicle, a tools vehicle that was handling that. But when they contacted the tower, they were stepped on. And what that means is that they transmitted at the same time as someone else. The other one had a stronger transmitter, so their call did not come through. And they then thought that maybe my radio doesn't work very well. So they switched the roles. So instead of this tool van being the one that was going to lead the convoy, this truck now became the leader and did the communication, which means that there's also that factor of maybe not being fully prepared to do it, not being mentally, because for us, obviously, doing radio communication with towers is not a big thing, and we do it all the time. But maybe someone who doesn't do it very often and wasn't prepared to do it here now put themselves in a position where they have to do it. So you have that on top of it. But then when the fire truck started moving in, got the clearance to cross, went in towards the runway, the other people in the convoy, the other vehicles, they looked out and they saw the aircraft coming down for landing. And they called on their own internal frequency saying, stop, stop, stop. But that was not heard or wasn't reacted to, at least, by the fire truck. At the same time, the tower controller almost immediately saw that, oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have cleared them. So they also said stop. But they were talking to another aircraft at the same time on the other side of the taxiway. So there I could definitely see how the fire truck maybe thought that this call was not for them. It was for the other aircraft that the tower controller was already talking to. And the thing is, there's so little margin of error here. There's so little time for misunderstandings and checking of the misunderstanding, because they were now, the aircraft is barreling down onto the touchdown zone at like 110, 120 knots, that's 200 kilometers per hour. And this fire truck was coming at 50 kilometers per hour straight out into the intersection. So you literally only have, I think it was 4 seconds between the aircraft touchdown and the collision. There's so little margin here for misunderstandings and mistakes in communication. You can just see, like, it's so heartbreaking.
It's the perfect storm, isn't it? Where everything lines up, as these things I so often do. That if any one of them was removed, it wouldn't happen. But there was a question on this as well, saying that if an aircraft if they were cleared to land, and they heard the crossing clearance from the other aircraft, from the truck one, would the crew have picked that up?
Yeah.
Would they have noticed that? And it's a good question. And it depends. Possibly.
It's like, if someone is listening for that, they would pick it up.
Oh yeah,
right. But the problem here is that part. Are they listening for that? Because we as humans, you prioritize different things at different times. So if they were flying level flight in cruise and listening to it, they would probably pick it up. But when you're on final approach, you're finishing your checklist, you've been cleared to land, the crew's main focus is going to be, is the aircraft stabilized? Are we running towards the touchdown zone? Does everything look okay? But that doesn't necessarily mean listening to ground traffic, because there's a lot of chatter going on the tower frequency all the time.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't typically need to monitor if someone is crossing the runway when we've been cleared to land, because it just shouldn't happen. So yeah, I mean, there's a high. We know that the calls were heard on the cockpit voice recorder. That was one of the parts of the interim report. That yes, these calls, the vehicle one, stop, that was captured on the CVR. But from that to the pilots hearing, processing, and understanding what that meant is a completely different thing.
Particularly when they're dealing with an emergency on another runway, it'd be very easy to assume it's on that runway, isn't it? It's not. If it was the only runway, you might be a bit more tuned in. But when you're hearing people crossing runways, when there's a multi-runway airport, it may not flag, and we don't know yet. I don't think we have the CVR data from the flight crew yet.
No.
So we don't know, because at 5 miles they got the landing clearance. That's typically the point between 5 and 4 you might be doing your landing checks. Yep. So it's perfectly conceivable that they were in the middle of responding to a checklist item as that clearance to cross was given, which they wouldn't have heard.
Yeah, no.
We can only really process one thing at a time.
Absolutely, but it's just like you said before. This is a perfect storm of things going wrong. Every single thing happened at exactly the time. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that these kind of things, mistakes like this, they happen literally every day, all the time. But in 99.9999% of the cases, they are picked up.
Yeah.
And if that would have been the case here, if they would at 4 miles or whatever have questioned it, like, confirm we're still clear to land, the tower controller would have said, negative, go around. And he would have gone around, and we would have never heard about this.
This is it. Yeah.
It's exactly what happens all the time, because the safeguards do work. It's only when you have this insane chain of different things, everything from that other aircraft that needed support, to the two people in the tower, to the timing of the calls, to everything had to happen exactly when it did in order for this tragedy to happen. And then the heartbreaking fact of the captain having been a captain for like a month and a half, just upgraded, stellar guys apparently. Everyone liked these people, did a great job. Really young first officer as well, together with this new captain who did everything that right from what we can see, and it still ended up in the way that it did.
Yes, sometimes it is out of your hands. If you miss that call because you're in the middle of a checklist, there's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter who you are, and it is so tragic. And it just needs one of those things to be removed, and it turns into a non-event that you never hear of. And it's
that's
just
the thing. That's the thing that's really fascinating here. That one change. And it doesn't even, it's not like it just gradually goes down to almost fatal. It goes down to nothing.
No.
That goes down to something that probably wouldn't have even been reported. If they would have gone around at 1,000 feet or whatever when they were going, it would have been nothing. No one would have heard about this.
But this is something that I really focus on during training, because the little things that pilots can do can make the difference between, a non-event and something like this. We spoke about the A380 that did the bulk landing in Heathrow last week or 2 weeks ago. That one decision, potentially, we don't know how it would have turned out. It probably would have been fine. But that decision could have made the difference between an A380 going off the end of a runway at one of the busiest international airports in the world, or just a quick YouTube video of an A380 going around. That one decision. And I mean, I had it actually flying fairly recently. I was going into France somewhere. There's some light aircraft in the area. And I asked I always make an effort of asking ATC where VFR traffic are, just so they're all talking in French, so it builds a picture in my mind. I mean, they're I don't know, Amalis, they're orbiting, but that's where our go-around track would have taken us. And so I just confirmed, so look, in the event of a go-around, can you just confirm that traffic will be clear? Then there's a bit more talking in French, and then they came back with, we're going to get him to move more to the northeast, so you'll be clear. So it's just these little things that...
Was it Biarritz?
No, it wasn't Biarritz, actually. No, no, it's Perpignan, this one, I think it was.
Perpignan,
I've had a few issues in Perpignan. Love Perpignan, but yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not too far away from where I am now.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And that's obviously, people are talking about getting rid of humans, because they want to remove the human factor from the accident chain. But I think a lot of people misunderstand is that it's the human element that stops a lot of these. A lot of these. And if there is no human element there that can kind of foresee potential conflicts and speak to them like you did in this case, all right? Just that's in our missed approach path. So if we do a go around, we're going to end up there. An automatic system would not do that. An automatic system would just come down to the minima, realize it can't land, go around, and then deal with the traffic conflict when you're heading in towards that cluster of VFR traffic. But a human can perceive it, can foresee it, can sort it out without, well ahead of time. And that, I think, is that's the magic ingredients that pilots constantly add. And that needs to be appreciated, really.
It does. And I mean, talking about other systems that could potentially help humans and work together would be transponders on the ground equipment, going back to LaGuardia.
See, that did surprise me, actually. That this is something that you can clearly see, like that. Why would you not have transponders? For those of you who are listening who don't know what transponders are, it's these little radio boxes that send out position information from both aircraft, but can also be on ground vehicles. And in the case of LaGuardia, there was a system, an anti-collision system that they had in the tower that relied on transponders and ground radar information. But the problem is the ground radar is really, because of the nature of trying to see things with radar close to the ground, it's not really reliable. So in this case, because these vehicles, none of them had transponders, the ground radar only picked up 2 out of the 7 vehicles, and therefore it was so unsecure that it couldn't send out any warnings. So there was no warning, no collision warning. Well, if these guys would have had it, the collision warning would have been there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we have them in the UK, so any kind of ground vehicle in the UK will have a transponder, and the advantage for that, it actually happened to me not that long ago. Actually, it was low visibility as well. So we were lining up to depart on this runway, it was thick fog, and there was a ranger vehicle moving from the north side of the airfield to the south side. To do that, they had to cross the runway. So we were hearing that, and it's very procedural, as it would be in low vis. We heard them clear to cross, and they have to call vacated. Once they were called vacated, we were cleared to line up and wait. We heard them call vacated. We lined up on the runway, and as we line up on the runway, well, just before, we turn our transponder to on, fully on, and it shows all of the traffic around us. And it showed up, this car, as a yellow traffic advisory on the right. It looked like on the runway based on our navigation display. So we lined up on the runway, and this yellow dot now was right in front of us. So obviously we clarified that. Can you just confirm that that ops vehicle has actually cleared the runway? Because from our view, it looks like it's on the runway. They had a conversation. They went, no, I'm 100% sure I've cleared the runway. I'm actually taxiing down the parallel taxiway right now. I'm driving down the... And they're like, okay, grand. There's just a bit of a delay, I think, in the reporting of the transponder position. And we were cleared to go. But if he had got it wrong and it was stopped on the runway, not the taxiway, that one thing, again, would have prevented a potential disaster from happening.
Yeah.
So these transponders are so valuable.
Absolutely. So that was that. I mean, we had some questions about that. Did we have any more questions?
On that, no, they were the main ones I think that I picked up, and then I looked in the comments. There's a lot of conversations on, so hopefully we've addressed a lot. Well, at least spoken about them.
Yeah,
and I'm sure these will come out. We'll get answers to all of these in the final report. But yeah, for me, that was the main takeaways I think of this.
Yeah, and I think again, the one thing that I want to really highlight is that in a situation like this, when something like this happens, it's never ever going to be down to one person or one mistake or one system. There's always going to be a combination, and we then as an industry have to work together to remove the weaknesses that something like this highlights. And that's what this report, the interim report and the final report is all about. That's what we are going to try to have to do after this has been concluded.
And on that note, actually, I noticed in the comments there was a lot of blame aimed at the fire truck that went on, which I completely understand, and I think it's very natural to want to assign blame. But as Petter said, it's not. We can't just blame one thing. If it was the crew's fault, we've got to look at why. Why did that a crew of 18 years experience do that? It comes down to more than just the individual mistake. Training.
I mean, this is one of the things that I find not the most frustrating, because it's very human, like you say, but it is really the difference between aviation industry and other industries is this fact that we realize that even if someone made an outrageous mistake, the question shouldn't be who did the mistake, let's get rid of them. The question should be how come that outrageous mistake happened in the first place? Because unless there is like criminal intent or criminal negligence, no one goes to work to end up in a collision with an aircraft. No one goes to work to end up in an accident. That means that everyone's intentions were good, which means that somewhere along the line, something happened that even though the best of intentions, an accident still happened. And that's the root cause. Yeah. That's what we need to find and eliminate. We don't eliminate people who make mistakes, because what we will end up doing then is eliminate everyone.
Of course you will. Yeah. And I think, people might ask, well, what can you do? And it's really just focuses on the training and the kind of culture. You might find in the investigation that the training was lacking in that particular department of runway crossings, in which case there'll be a lot more training, and you can pretty much guarantee that probably will never happen again now. And that's how aviation grows. Every procedure we have is written in blood for that reason. So we grow and we learn from the previous mistakes. So yeah, I'd refrain from really pointing fingers, as tempting as that is, and as frustrating as that can sometimes be not doing it. It's important we look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. We have a few minutes before I have to run again. I'm always going somewhere when we're celebrating this, when we're doing these celebrating. Anyway, Spiro sent to a few questions that he had picked up as well.
Okay.
Let's see if we can take one. This one is quite interesting, actually. Hi, captains. I have 2 questions for you. 1. Does flying at home on a flight simulator, especially online networks like VATSIM, have any real impact on getting into an airliner later on? Can it actually make the path easier, or is it mostly irrelevant from a recruitment point of view? And 2, this is a more movie-style question. Could someone with strong simulator experience sitting on board as a passenger realistically step in and replace the pilots if something happened to them? Or is that pure Hollywood fantasy? Thanks a lot for the great work. Regards from the sender. So, which one do you want to take? Do you want to take the number 1 or 2?
Yeah, I can take the first one. I think it depends which way you look at it. I mean, from a recruitment perspective, no, it's not going to make any difference. You know, if you said I've got 10,000 hours on Microsoft Flight Sim, will make zero difference to the recruitment. However, and this very much depends on how you're using the sim. If you're using the sim using kind of real world procedures or procedures that are rooted in genuine ops, it will help you massively in your type rating because you're so familiar with the aircraft, the systems, the flows, the FMC, and it's something we actually cover, isn't it, Peter, in our virtual 737 course?
Absolutely. This is kind of part of the reason why we have it. So for those of you who doesn't know, me and Ben, we've gotten together and we created a course for flight simulator pilots who want to do it as professionally as possible, but also for people who are just generally interested in all of the things that we do in the cockpit. What's the website they need to go to?
Yeah, if you go to virtual737course.com, have a look over there. And we do max differences training. We do the whole 737 from cold, dark cockpit through to start up, taxi out, the whole flight, non-precision approaches, Cat 3, go around, taxi in, even 25-minute turnaround. So
exactly. And we explain what we do, why we do it in exactly the same way as we do here on the podcast. So if you are interested in really learning exactly every button push that we do and why, this is the thing to do. I think it's over 10 hours of instructional course that you can do at your own pace. It's all modularized. You get access to checklists and all of these things, so you can do it at your own pace when you want to do it. And I highly recommend it. But if you do it like that, then, I mean, we know that people going into the type rating have been using this course in order to be successful in their type rating.
Yeah, they come up to me and say, I've done that, and it has massively helped them.
Yeah. So you can actually help yourself. But yeah, I wouldn't even mention it if you go into a recruitment, because it also, you know, there's also preconceived, no matter how professional you are flying in these networks or whatever, you are not dealing with a pilot when you're going into the personnel interview. You're dealing with someone from personnel, and there might be preconceived, pictures of who someone is that has been doing 12,000 hours in front of a simulator screen, right? So I wouldn't even mention it. It's like a secret weapon that you have. You know much more.
Exactly. Because I used it even years ago. There was Microsoft Flight Sim 98 or 2000, I think I used, and it had the basic on there. But I used that to my advantage. So yeah, use it, but it won't help you get a job necessarily.
No. And the second part of your question, whether or not you can step in and land an airliner. So I actually did a video on this. You can go out and check it. I did it together with Tom Scott, another YouTuber. Where this was really interesting. I put him. He didn't have a lot of simulator experience, but he had flown like a light aircraft at some point. But we put him in a full flight simulator alone, only him, and then of course someone was handling the simulator who didn't say a word, not a peep, but he was alone in the cockpit. And then he had a little radio, and I was inside of a briefing room outside of the simulator, and I had to talk him down. And what we learned from that, you'll come to see if you watch the video, it's very, very interesting, is that given enough time, so given enough fuel on board, I could get him to set up the autopilot system for a safe landing and get it to stop on the runway. But getting him to fly it was impossible.
No.
Absolutely impossible. So, but there is, so if you've flown a lot of simulators, you've flown the 737 specifically, you know how to manipulate the mode control panel. You know how to set up the FMC. You know probably how to use the radio, even if you maybe don't recognize the buttons since they're now tactile and not on a screen. But you have a lot of points there. So I'd say, given the choice between you and someone who has no idea, I would definitely go with you.
100%.
Right? But you're still going to need a pilot to tell you all of the stuff to make sure that nothing has been skipped, because obviously one step skipped and the aircraft will not engage with the localizer, or it will not be able to fly the ILS, or it won't, you've forgotten to put the outer brake on, it's not going to stop on the runway. So that's what I would say. I think that you have a big advantage, but no, I don't think that you, without the help of someone, could just step in and fly the aircraft.
Good question, though.
Yes. But anyway, it was good that you brought it up, because we really want people to go and check out our virtual 737 course. So once again, the website that you have to go to is
virtual737course.com.
Yep. you can choose whatever you want. You can do it either in small steps, so you can buy the whole course. It's great, and we were really proud of what we have. And there's going to be previous students in there who've given their kind of testimonials of how they felt about it, to read through that first, because we stand behind what we've done 100%.
Yeah.
And on that note, I want to say thank you for listening. Send in your questions again for the next podcast that's going to come in 2 weeks. And have an absolutely fantastic day. Thank you.
Well, take care, everyone.